Hey everyone, Mr. Ambrose here with your Sonnet of the Night. Tonight we are taking a look at the ninth sonnet of Shakespeare's sonnet series. Here we are, Sonnet 9. Is it for fear to wed a widow's eye that thou consumest thyself in single life? Ha! If thou issueless shalt hap to die, the world will wail thee like a makeless wife. The world will be thy widow, and still weep that thou no form of thee hast left behind, when every private widow well may keep by children's eyes her husband's shape in mind. Look what an unthrift in the world doth spend shifts but his place, for still the world enjoys it. But beauty's waste hath in the world an end, and kept unused the user so destroys it. No love toward others in that bosom sits, that on himself such murderous shame commits. All right, so this one begins with a rhetorical question for the fair youth. Shakespeare asks, is it for fear to wed a widow's eye that thou consumest thyself in single life? And in that question, Shakespeare basically asks, is the reason you don't want to have children because you don't want to make someone a widow and you don't want to make that widow sad? Is that why? This is the ninth of 17 procreation sonnets, so we're about midway through the portion of the sonnet series dealing with procreation, and Shakespeare is starting to think about reasons why the fair youth might not want to have children. So he says, well, maybe it's because you don't want to make someone a widow, and maybe you don't want to leave that woman behind. And basically what Shakespeare explains in the sonnet is, well, it's better to leave a widow with children than to leave the world a widow and leave nothing behind. So he starts out with a rhetorical question, then gets really pragmatic and says, well, I might understand why you don't want to make someone a widow, but at the same time, if you're not having children, you're leaving the world a widow, and that world is going to mourn your loss. Toward the end of the poem, he starts to get economical, as he has in previous poems, and he starts to talk about someone being unthrifty. And he points out that if you are a spender, a big spender living a life of luxury, you're taking your money and you're putting your money out into the world. You're putting that money into the economy. So that's benefiting the world, right? So even if you're spending a lot of yourself and you're spending a lot of your money, that money is going out into the economy and improving the world. But if you don't spend your beauty, then you won't be giving any beauty to the world. So he begins with a rhetorical question, and he explains why it would be better for him to love and leave someone behind than to never love at all. And then he explains that in an economical term as well. You know, one thing that stands out to me about this poem is a literary device known as alliteration. As you look here in this poem, there's a lot of alliteration throughout, and much of the alliteration deals with words that start with the W sound. Wah. So the first line right from the beginning, we have wet a widow's eye. And as we continue down into line 4 and 5, the world will wail thee like a makeless wife. The world will be thy widow and still weep. And as we go through this poem, there's a lot of repetition of those W words. World, will, wail, weep, wife, widow. And I think that alliteration, if you just were to highlight those words that all start with W, you can definitely identify the theme of the poem pretty clearly. So it's one of the ways Shakespeare uses some great literary devices to call attention to the big theme of the poem. If we just key into those words, the world will weep and wail. If you leave the world without a wife, we can pretty much pinpoint the theme of this sonnet by simply focusing on those words. So as you're reading Shakespeare's sonnets, let's look for alliteration. Let's look for other literary devices, because oftentimes Shakespeare's use of figurative language devices and sound devices will point us right in the direction of the theme, and they will serve to support the theme and spotlight it. For your assignment for tonight, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to write a poem that begins with a rhetorical question. Again, Shakespeare begins this one with the question, is it for fear to wed a widow's eye that thou consumest thyself in single life? And then as you go through your poem tonight, I want you to think about trying to incorporate some alliteration. So the theme of your poem can be whatever you choose it to be. But the literary devices I would like you to use, I would like you to try to use some rhetorical question, and I would like you to use some alliteration. I really look forward to seeing what you come up with for that. Until next time, take care.